Welcome to my channel, where your adventure into the future starts right now. Step into a vibrant universe filled with groundbreaking technology, breathtaking alien landscapes, and exhilarating sci-fi narratives that challenge your imagination. From daring explorations of distant galaxies to haunting journeys through dystopian societies, we uncover the most captivating stories and innovative ideas that will shape the world of tomorrow. Subscribe today and join us on an incredible intergalactic voyage that promises to inspire and thrill. In the vast expanse of the galaxy, communication was often a challenge, especially when it came to interspecies interactions. The galaxy was a cacophony of diverse cultures, each with its own unique way of speaking, of expressing ideas and emotions, of conveying meaning. There were thousands of languages, each one tied to the biology and history of the species that used it. To communicate with an alien species, one had to not only learn their language but also understand their perspective, their thought processes, and their physical limitations. Some species spoke through complex pheromonal signals, others with light, others still through telepathy. Some used sounds that humans could never hope to hear, while others communicated through vibrations or even direct interaction with their environment. At first, the diverse methods of communication were seen as obstacles that hindered the development of true interspecies diplomacy and cooperation. The galactic community was divided, with each species speaking in its own tongue, separated by vast differences in their communication systems. The few successful collaborations were born out of intense study, laborious translation, and a lot of trial and error, but even then, true understanding was difficult to achieve. There were always nuances lost in translation, cultural gaps that couldn't be bridged, and more often than not, relationships between species fell apart not because of political disagreements, but because of simple misunderstandings. Yet in the face of these challenges, one species began to rise above the rest, not with advanced technology or elaborate diplomacy, but with a simple, yet profoundly human idea: why not create a universal sign language? Humans had long understood the importance of communication. On Earth, they had developed a variety of languages, from the spoken to the written, from body language to nonverbal cues. In the context of their own species, sign language had always been a tool for those who could not hear or speak, a bridge for communication when verbal exchange was impossible. But what made humans unique was their ability to adapt and innovate in the face of limitations. In an effort to better understand and connect with each other, they had worked for centuries to develop ways of transcending barriers, be they physical, cultural, or linguistic. It was this very adaptability, this talent for creating bridges between disparate ways of thinking and being, that led humans to their most ambitious project yet: the creation of a universal sign language that could be used by all species, regardless of their biology, their history, or their physical makeup. It began as an idea, simple at first, born out of the need to facilitate communication between two species that could not understand each other's spoken languages. Humans had been in contact with an alien species called the Torlax, a highly intelligent but largely non-verbal race that communicated through intricate patterns of electromagnetic pulses. The Torlax had no vocal cords, no mouth with which to form words. They were a race of thinkers, but when it came to communicating with others, their methods had always been cryptic. Their method of communication required precise electromagnetic signals that humans couldn't detect or understand, and their physical forms were so different that traditional sign language, as humans understood it, was ineffective. At first, there had been many attempts to simply learn the Torlax electromagnetic pulses, but it quickly became clear that this was no simple task. Their signals were too complex for humans to replicate or decode. The Torlax were able to understand each other easily, but to anyone else, their communications seemed like chaos. No one had been able to truly understand them in any meaningful way. Some species had tried, unsuccessfully, to develop technologies to interpret their pulses. Others had tried to negotiate, but even in the rare cases where the two species communicated, there was always something missing, something fundamental that kept true understanding just out of reach. That's when humans, with their typical resolve and ingenuity, came up with an idea: instead of focusing on replicating the Torlax's unique method of communication, why not develop something entirely new? A language that could transcend the physical barriers between species, a system of communication that could be adapted to any species, no matter their biology. It was a lofty ambition, but humans were driven by the notion that no species should be isolated, no civilization should be unable to communicate. If there was one thing that could unite beings from all corners of the galaxy, it was the desire to understand and be understood. The idea of a universal sign language was born out of this desire, and it was based on the principles that humans had used throughout their history to communicate with each other in spite of their differences. Human sign language itself was already incredibly versatile. It was not confined to the spoken word but allowed for expression through gestures, body movements, and even facial expressions. It was fluid and adaptable, able to be used by individuals who couldn't speak, couldn't hear, or couldn't rely on their vocal cords. But the humans who took on the project quickly realized that a truly universal sign language would need to be even more versatile. It would have to be adaptable to every possible form of biological expression, capable of conveying complex ideas through a variety of methods, whether through gestures, colors, light patterns, vibrations, or even telepathic images. The first step was to break down the human sign language into its most basic components, concepts. Humans had long used a system of hand signs to convey simple ideas like yes, no, good, and bad. These concepts were built on universal human experiences, needs, desires, emotions, and observations. But when it came to other species, especially those with completely different sensory perceptions, these simple signs weren't enough. Humans couldn't rely on their own physical experiences as a baseline. They needed something that could be understood across the vast diversity of the galaxy. The next step was to find universal concepts that all species, regardless of their biology or culture, could understand. Humans had to reach beyond their own cultural experiences and focus on the fundamental concepts of existence, concepts that any sentient being, regardless of form or thought processes, could comprehend. They started with the basics: survival, danger, comfort, hunger, thirst, joy, pain, and companionship. These were not concepts tied to any particular species, but were instead universal experiences, feelings that any sentient being would understand, even if their ways of perceiving them differed. The key breakthrough came when the humans developed a system that used a combination of visual and tactile cues. It wasn't just about hand gestures. It was about creating an expressive language that could be understood through light, sound, electromagnetic pulses, or even touch. For example, for a species that couldn't see, the language could be interpreted through vibrations or sounds. For species that communicated through light or color, the signs could be transmitted through changing wavelengths. For telepathic species, the signs could be expressed through mental images or emotions, guiding their understanding through their innate mental abilities. Once the basic concepts were established, the next challenge was creating a syntax, a structure for how the signs could be put together to form more complex thoughts. Humans had long been familiar with the idea of non-verbal communication as a means of expressing subtlety and nuance. They knew that to truly convey complex ideas, they would need to create a way for each sign to build upon the others, allowing for a flow of conversation that could express everything from basic needs to abstract concepts like philosophy, art, and love. Over time, the system of universal sign language began to take shape. The signs were simple enough to be adapted to any species, but complex enough to allow for sophisticated communication. Each species could use the system in a way that suited their own biology, with the gestures and symbols being customized to their abilities. A species that communicated with electromagnetic pulses could use the system to express thoughts through pulses of light or heat. A race that used sound waves could convey meaning through vibrations. Even species with telepathic abilities could project emotions or visual images as part of the sign language. When the first interspecies conversations began to take place using the new universal sign language, the results were nothing short of astounding. For the first time, species that had been completely isolated from one another by the limitations of their biology were able to communicate. The Torlax, whose electromagnetic pulses had once been inscrutable, were able to understand and communicate with humans through the universal system. Species that had once spoken in unintelligible clicks and whistles now found themselves able to converse with other races, sharing ideas and learning from each other in ways that had never been possible before. The significance of this achievement was not lost on the galactic community. The ability to communicate across species lines meant that the barriers to cooperation, understanding, and peaceful coexistence were no longer insurmountable. With the universal sign language in place, the galaxy was no longer divided by its linguistic and biological differences. Species could now share their knowledge, their culture, and their resources in a way that was previously unimaginable. The universal sign language became a powerful tool for diplomacy, for trade, for education, and for the exchange of ideas. But beyond its practical applications, the universal sign language became a symbol of something even greater, the unity of the galaxy. It showed that, despite the many differences between species, there were fundamental truths that bound all sentient beings together. It proved that, no matter how varied the forms of life might be, there was always a way to reach out and connect, to communicate, to understand, and to bridge the gaps between cultures and species. In the years that followed, humanity's contribution to galactic communication became a cornerstone of the galaxy's progress. The universal sign language allowed species that had once been locked in isolation to join together in ways that no one had ever thought possible. It was a testament to the creativity, adaptability, and perseverance of humanity, and it left a lasting legacy that would shape the future of the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had shown the galaxy that, despite the vastness of space and the incredible diversity of life within it, there was always a way to reach across the divide. All it took was the willingness to try, the creativity to see beyond the obvious, and the desire to understand. In a universe filled with stars and worlds, humanity's greatest gift was the gift of communication, and it was a gift that would unite the galaxy for centuries to come.